Gerald Hoffman just handed 7 years of my perfect work to his 24-year-old daughter who'd been here 3 months. My name is Austin Walsh. I'm 48 years old, and I'd just watched my boss choose blood over merit. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. Sophia's going to do great things as our new regional operations director, Gerald announced, like he was doing us all a favor. Everyone clapped politely. I clapped too, because that's what you do when your boss destroys your career in front of your co-workers. Sophia stood there beaming like she'd earned something more than a college diploma and daddy's last name. 20 years in the Navy taught me about earning respect through competence. Gerald was teaching his daughter something different entirely. The whole time I'm thinking about my daughter Casey, 18 years old, starting college in the fall. Casey's first tuition bill, $15,000 due in August. My alimony, $12,200 every month. At 48, with college payments looming and a mortgage that doesn't care about workplace politics, most men would shut up and take it. Gerald kept talking about fresh perspectives and new energy. Austin's been invaluable helping Sophia learn the ropes, he said, like that somehow made it better. Like 7 years of 60-hour weeks and perfect client relationships was just an extended training program for his kid. In the service, we had a saying, rank has its privileges, but competence keeps people alive. Gerald was about to learn that in civilian life, competence keeps businesses alive too. The meeting ended. People shook Sophia's hand and said congratulations. I packed up my notebook and headed for the door, moving slow because my head was spinning. Not from shock, I'd seen this coming for weeks. What hit me was the clarity. Like when you've been trying to solve a problem for months and suddenly the answer's obvious. Gerald caught my arm. Austin, stick around a minute. We stood there alone while the room emptied out. Gerald loosened his tie and tried to look sympathetic. He was 55, soft around the middle, thinning hair combed over to hide the worst of it. Got his current position when his father-in-law retired from the board. Same playbook he just ran with Sophia. I know this might come as a surprise, he said. No surprise here, Gerald. I've been watching you groom Sophia for months. His face shifted. Well, she brings a lot to the table. Fresh thinking, new approaches. What do I bring to the table? Experience, stability. Those are valuable too. Valuable enough to train your replacement. Not valuable enough to get promoted myself. Look, Austin, this wasn't personal. The board wanted someone with vision. Right. Vision. I looked at him for a long moment. In the Navy, we called that different things depending on whether it worked or got people killed. Gerald didn't appreciate the military reference. The point is, we're moving forward. I need you to help Sophia transition into her new role. Of course you do. I walked back to my desk thinking about the last 7 years. Started at Iron Gate Industries right after my divorce was final. Needed steady work and a fresh start. Industrial equipment distribution seemed solid enough. Boring work that paid $72,000 and let me focus on rebuilding my life. Gerald hired me himself back then. Said they needed someone with my background. 20 years in the Navy teaches you logistics, he said. Discipline, leadership. We're growing fast and need experienced people. I became that experienced person. Worked weekends when shipments ran late. Handled emergency calls at 2 a.m. when clients had equipment failures across 4 states. Built relationships with suppliers from Phoenix to Miami. My performance reviews were perfect every single year. Gerald always smiled, always promised bigger things. Your management material, Austin. Just be patient. Patient. 20 years of military service teaches you patience, but it also teaches you when patience becomes stupidity. The first hint of trouble came 6 months ago when Gerald mentioned his daughter might join the company. Smart girl, he said. Just graduated with a business degree. I figured she'd start at the bottom like everyone else. Learn the business from the ground up. But Sophia didn't start at the bottom. Started in the office next to Gerald's with the title Operations Specialist and a salary I could only guess at. Gerald introduced her around like visiting royalty. She's here to observe our processes, he said. Learn how we do things. Sophia observed by sitting in on my client calls and taking notes while I explained vendor negotiations. Asked questions that showed she had no idea what we actually did. What's the difference between just-in-time delivery and standard shipping? Why do we need backup suppliers? Why can't clients just order everything at once? But she was polite and eager, said yes sir and thank you like her parents raised her right. I trained her because that's what you do. Help the new person. Even when the new person's last name is Hoffman and her daddy signs your paychecks. Even when you start to suspect where this is heading. I knew for sure 3 weeks ago. Stayed late finishing quarterly reports, going through vendor performance data. Office was empty except for the cleaning crew. Went to get coffee from the break room and heard voices coming from Gerald's office. Door was cracked open and sound carries better than people think. The board's going to ask questions, Gerald was saying. Sophia's only been here 3 months. That was Charles Bennett from corporate. You said Austin was ready for the promotion. Austin's solid, Gerald replied, but Sophia's family, and she's got the degree. Board likes fresh blood. What about Austin's experience? Gerald actually laughed. Austin's a good worker. Reliable. But he's not executive material. He'll keep doing what he's doing, make good money. Everyone wins. I stood in that hallway for maybe 30 seconds listening to them plan my future. Sophia would get old Henderson's position, the same position I'd been working towards since 2019. I'd train her, support her, and pretend to be grateful for the opportunity. Austin won't cause problems, Gerald continued. He's got responsibilities, college tuition coming up, alimony payments. He needs this job. He'll play ball, like I was some kind of team mascot instead of a professional with 20-plus years of experience. In the Navy, we had another saying, respect is earned, not inherited. Gerald was about to get a lesson in both. I walked away quietly, went back to my desk, saved my work, and left. Drove home in silence. Couldn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about Gerald's words and my ex-wife's voice from years ago. You're too passive, Austin. You let people walk all over you. Maybe she was right. But 20 years of military discipline teaches you the difference between being passive and choosing your moment. Gerald thought he had me figured out, thought I'd stay quiet because of my bills and responsibilities. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Next morning I came to work different, watched how Gerald included Sophia in executive meetings while keeping me focused on day-to-day operations. Saw how other managers started deferring to Sophia on decisions that should have been mine. 3 weeks later, sitting in that conference room watching Sophia accept congratulations for a job she hadn't earned, something clicked. I opened my laptop and started typing my resignation letter. Hands were steady, head was clear. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I submitted my resignation at exactly 4:30 p.m. on Friday. Gerald had just finished walking Sophia around the warehouse, showing her what he called her new domain. I knocked on his door and handed him the envelope. This is my 2 weeks' notice. Gerald's face went through several expressions, confusion, disbelief, then something that looked like panic. He tore open the envelope and read quickly. Is this some kind of joke? No, sir. You can't be serious. You're leaving because Sophia got promoted? I stayed quiet. Let him fill the silence. Another thing the Navy teaches you. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Gerald stood up and paced behind his desk. Austin, let's be reasonable here. You're upset, I get it. But walking away from 7 years, that's not smart. I've made my decision. What about your daughter? Your responsibilities? There it was. The leverage he thought he had over me. The reason I'd fall in line and keep quiet like a good little soldier. I'll figure it out. His tone got harder. You realize how this looks? Quitting because you didn't get promoted. It's unprofessional. I can see how you'd think that. I won't give you a good reference, you understand? No company's going to want someone who throws tantrums. 7 years of perfect performance and now I was throwing tantrums. 7 years of staying late and working weekends and handling emergencies, and now I was being unprofessional. That's your choice, Gerald. He sat back down and tried a different approach. Look, I like you. You're good at what you do, but Sophia brings vision, innovation, the future of this company. And what do I bring? Experience. That's valuable too, just not valuable enough to promote. Don't do this, Austin. Take the weekend. Think it over. Come back Monday and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. He actually believed I would back down, believed that threatening my reference would make me fold like a bad poker hand. I'll finish my 2 weeks, train Sophia on anything she needs to know. Gerald's face darkened. You think Sophia needs training from someone who quits when things don't go his way? She'll need to understand the vendor contracts, supply chain logistics, emergency protocols, unless you plan to figure all that out yourself. That hit home. Gerald knew he didn't understand the technical side. Neither did Sophia. They needed me for at least 2 more weeks and we all knew it. Fine, 2 weeks. but don't expect any favors after that." I nodded and headed for the door. "Austin," Gerald called after me, "you're making a mistake. A big one. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." Monday morning brought reality. I arrived early as usual and found Sophia already at her desk looking overwhelmed. She had spreadsheets open on 3 monitors and was frantically taking notes from vendor emails. "Morning, Sophia. How's the transition going?" She looked up with relief flooding her face. "Austin, thank God. I've been here since 6 trying to understand the Westfield manufacturing account. Their procurement manager is threatening to cancel if we don't resolve some shipping issue by noon. Westfield Manufacturing, our biggest client, worth $3.1 million annually. I'd been managing their account personally for 4 years, building the relationship through reliable service and understanding their just-in-time delivery requirements. What's the issue? Something about delayed titanium components from our Tucson supplier, but I can't figure out which supplier and their emails are confusing." I looked at Sophia's screen. She was staring at supplier contracts that had nothing to do with titanium components. She had Westfield's email open, but she was also looking at contracts for completely different materials. She was drowning. "Did your father brief you on the Westfield relationship? He said you'd handle the transition, but then he mentioned your situation, and I thought maybe I should figure it out myself. Show initiative. My situation. That's what they were calling it now, like I was some kind of problem to be managed instead of the guy who'd been keeping their biggest client happy for 4 years. I spent the next 3 hours walking Sophia through the Westfield relationship, explained their just-in-time delivery requirements, why they needed components within 4-hour windows, how their production line would shut down if we missed deadlines. Showed her the backup supplier network I'd built over years of careful relationship building. "This is incredibly complex," Sophia said as we finished resolving the crisis. "How do you keep track of all these moving parts?" "Experience and good documentation. Could you show me your documentation system?" That's when I realized something important. Gerald hadn't just promoted Sophia without preparation. He'd promoted her without understanding what the job actually required. I spent my lunch break making phone calls. Word travels fast in industrial logistics, and people were already hearing about changes at Irongate. Some were concerned about continuity. Others were curious about new opportunities. "Austin," said Patricia Westfield, the procurement manager who'd threatened to cancel that morning. "I heard rumors about management changes. Please tell me you're still handling our account for the next 2 weeks. After that, Sophia Hoffman will be your primary contact." Silence on the line. "Hoffman? As in Gerald Hoffman's daughter?" "That's right. Jesus, Austin. That girl called me this morning asking questions that made no sense. I thought she was new to the team, not replacing you. She's eager to learn. I don't have time to train Irongate's management. We've got production schedules to meet. If your company can't provide competent service, we'll find someone who can." That conversation repeated itself with 3 other major clients: Copperfield Manufacturing, Border States Equipment, Atlantic Steel, all saying the same thing, all asking the same question. What the hell was Gerald thinking? By the end of the day, I had a clear picture of what would happen after I left. Sophia would struggle with accounts she didn't understand. Clients would get frustrated with delays and mistakes. Gerald would panic and try to micromanage operations he'd never bothered to learn. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Tuesday morning, Gerald called me into his office. He looked tired, stressed, like a man who'd been awake all night realizing he'd made a terrible mistake. "Austin, I've been thinking about our conversation Friday. Maybe we were hasty. Maybe there's room for both you and Madison in management." "Sophia," I corrected. "Right, Sophia. The point is, maybe you could be associate director. Sophia's second in command. You'd handle the technical side, she'd focus on strategic planning. Associate director. A made-up title that meant doing the same job for the same pay while pretending Sophia was my boss, while training her to do what I should have been promoted to do myself. That's generous, but I'll stick with my original decision." Bob's face hardened. "You're going to regret this, Austin. I promise you that. Maybe. But I'm done living in fear of your promises." By Wednesday, I had 3 job interviews scheduled. My plan went beyond simply leaving Irongate. I'd spent 7 years building relationships in the Southeast industrial supply chain. Those relationships were mine, not the company's. In the Navy, we learned that loyalty flows both ways, up and down the chain of command. Gerald had broken that chain. My first interview was Thursday morning with Summit Industrial Group in Tampa. Their regional manager, Preston Clark, had been trying to poach me for 2 years. "Austin," Preston said as we shook hands in his office, "I heard through the grapevine that you might be available. Word travels fast. It does when good people become available, especially people with your client relationships and technical expertise." Preston offered me Regional Operations Director, the exact title Gerald had given to Sophia. The salary was 30% higher than what I'd been making at Irongate, from $72,000 to $95,000. The benefits were better, and most importantly, they wanted me to bring my network with me. "We've been trying to break into the heavy machinery component market," Preston explained. "Your relationships with Westfield, Copperfield, and Atlantic Steel would be invaluable. It was standard practice. Clients followed account managers they trusted, especially in a relationship-based business like industrial supply. I hadn't signed a non-compete agreement, and the clients were free to choose their suppliers. I'd need to give Irongate my 2 weeks' notice, of course." "Professional courtesy." Preston smiled. "Though I suspect they might release you early once they understand the situation." Preston was right about that. Friday afternoon, Gerald called me into his office again. Sophia sat in the corner looking miserable. Word of my Thursday interview had reached them. "I hear you're interviewing with competitors," Gerald said. "I'm exploring opportunities while serving my notice period, while you're still employed here. That's a conflict of interest. I haven't shared any proprietary information. Your client relationships are proprietary. My client relationships are personal. I built them over 7 years of professional service." Gerald's face was red now. "Those clients belong to Irongate Manufacturing. You take them with you and we'll sue you for everything you're worth." Sophia spoke up from the corner. "Dad, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Sophia." Gerald didn't take his eyes off me. "You walk out that door and try to steal our clients, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." I stood up slowly. 20 years in the Navy teaches you to stay calm under pressure. Gerald, I've given you 7 years of my life. Perfect performance reviews. 60-hour weeks. I trained your daughter to take the job you promised me. I've been nothing but professional through this entire process. I'm protecting my business. I'm finishing my 2 weeks and moving on to a better opportunity. What happens after that depends on how your daughter handles the transition." Gerald leaned back in his chair. "We'll see about that." I walked to the door and turned back. "Sophia, if you need help with anything over the next week, just ask. Despite what your father thinks, I want you to succeed." Sophia nodded gratefully. Gerald glared. I spent my last week at Irongate documenting everything Sophia would need to know. Not because Gerald deserved it, but because Sophia was 24 years old and had been thrown into an impossible situation. The people who depended on our supply chains deserved better than chaos. On my final day, I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to coworkers who'd become friends, and handed Gerald my security badge. "This isn't over," he said. "For me it is." I walked out of Irongate Industries feeling lighter than I had in years. Gerald thought he was punishing me. Instead, he'd set me free. The payback came 6 months later, but not in the way I'd expected. I was settling into my new role at Summit Industrial when Preston Clark called me into his office with a grin on his face. "Austin, you need to see this." He slid a business magazine across his desk. The headline read, "Irongate Industries Regional Division Loses Major Clients. Family Management Practices Under Investigation." The article detailed how Irongate had lost 4 major accounts in 5 months, including Westfield Manufacturing and Atlantic Steel. Revenue in the Southeast region was down 58%. The board had launched an investigation into management practices after shareholders raised questions about nepotism and operational failures. "Gerald Hoffman was terminated last week," Preston said. Apparently, the board discovered that Sophia Hoffman had been hired without proper qualifications. Full nepotism investigation, they're calling it. I read further. Sophia had resigned voluntarily after 3 months of struggling with accounts she couldn't manage. She'd returned to graduate school, according to the article. Gerald faced a lawsuit from Westfield Manufacturing for breach of contract after a supply chain failure caused a production delay that cost them $1.8 million. "Here's the interesting part," Preston continued. 3 of their remaining clients have already reached out to us, specifically asking if you're available to handle their accounts. The article mentioned that several former Irongate employees had been recruited by competitors, taking their institutional knowledge with them. No names were listed, but I recognized the pattern. When good people leave a company, others notice. When those people succeed elsewhere, clients notice too. What goes around comes around, Preston said. Gerald Hoffman spent 7 years taking you for granted. Now he's unemployed while you're building our Southeast division. I folded the magazine and handed it back. I feel bad for Sophia. Kid got thrown into a situation she wasn't ready for. Sophia will be fine. She's young. She'll learn from this. Gerald, on the other hand. Preston shrugged. Hard to feel sorry for someone who threw away good people to promote family. 6 months after that, I got a call from Casey. She was finishing her sophomore year at Florida State, studying business administration. Dad, I got the internship at Morrison Logistics, the one I told you about. That's great, sweetheart. You earned it. I've been thinking about what you went through at your old job, how you handled it. What about it? You could have been bitter. Could have bad-mouthed your old boss or made things difficult for that girl. But you didn't. You just did your job and moved on to something better. Sometimes that's all you can do. Focus on what you can control. I'm proud of you, Dad. Casey had no idea how much those words meant to me. In the Navy, we learned that the best victories are the ones where you maintain your honor while your enemies destroy themselves. A year later, I was driving through Jacksonville on business when I stopped for lunch near the airport. Sophia Hoffman was sitting alone in a corner booth reading a textbook. She looked up when I approached. Austin, what are you doing here? Business trip. Mind if I sit? She gestured to the seat across from her. The textbook was Supply Chain Management. She looked older, more serious. The entitled college graduate was gone, replaced by someone who understood what hard work meant. Back in school, master's program at Florida State. Supply chain focus. She smiled ruefully. Figured I should actually learn what I was supposed to be doing. That's smart. I wanted to thank you, Sophia said, for how you handled everything. You could have hung me out to dry, but you didn't. You tried to help me succeed even after after everything. You were in an impossible situation. Dad still blames you for everything, says you sabotaged the company. I sipped my coffee. What do you think? Sophia closed her textbook. I think I was 24 years old with a business degree and no real-world experience. I think Dad gave me a job I wasn't qualified for because I was family. And I think you spent 7 years earning a promotion that should have been yours. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. I'm sorry about how everything went down, Sophia said. You deserved better. We both did. But sometimes things work out the way they're supposed to. Sophia nodded. I heard you're doing well at Summit. I am. And you'll do well too, once you're ready. I paid for both our lunches and shook Sophia's hand before leaving. She was a good kid who'd been used as a pawn in her father's game. 6 months later, Gerald filed for bankruptcy after losing his wrongful termination lawsuit against Iron Gate's board of directors. The legal fees and judgment had wiped out his savings. Sophia graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at a logistics company in Miami, where she spent 2 years learning the business from the ground up before earning her first real promotion. The daughter had learned what the father never understood, that respect and advancement must be earned, not inherited. Last month, Casey graduated from Florida State summa cum laude, called me crying with joy about her job offer from a Fortune 500 company. Full benefits, signing bonus, the works. 20 years in the Navy taught me that sometimes you win by knowing when to walk away and when to stand your ground. Gerald learned that lesson too late. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away and building something better. Casey graduated debt-free, launched her career on merit instead of connections, and learned that integrity matters more than shortcuts. That's what matters most. That's the real victory.